afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is on how to nail your job interview. And in today's session, we're going to be joined by our three panelists that you can now see. We've got Natalie Mascarenhas from Baker McKenzie, we've got Chloe Vincent from Gadens, and we've got Zara Gardner, who is from Shine Lawyers. And we are going to cover a whole lot of different topics, and we're going to be able to ask these experts lots of different questions, and we'll cover things like the different types of job interviews, common interview questions, how to showcase your skills and achievements in a very, very kind of authentic, engaging way, and also some mental hacks for those that get very, very nervous before interviews. So I would like to just start off and do an acknowledgement of the country before I introduce our guests. So as we gather for this webinar, we recognise that many of us are on different lands of different traditional custodians. I would like to acknowledge all of the traditional custodians of the lands we are all present on today, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to each of their elders past, present and emerging. So let me introduce you to our three panelists. So Chloe is the HR coordinator at Gadens, and she's based in Melbourne. She coordinates recruitment for the Grads at Gadens program and assists with both legal support and business services recruitment across Melbourne and also Sydney. Natalie studied law and science with a psych major at Monash University and actually did her articles at Gadens, funny enough, in 2005. She practiced as a lawyer from 2005 to 11 as a commercial litigator, and after that spent 6 months in an in-house legal counsel role with the bank. She's been with Baker McKenzie from late 2011 to date, where she looks after, and I always feel very exhausted when I say this, after graduate and clerkship programs and recruitment processes, junior associates, grad projects, PD, L&D projects, and you previously also looked after the business service teams. She's also been involved in some of Baker McKenzie's community service initiatives and is a leader on their Baker Wellbeing Committee, which has a focus on mental health and wellbeing in the firm. She works part-time and has 2 beautiful little boys. Zara, who is based over in Brisbane, sunny Brisbane, is the talent acquisition business partner of Shine Justice Group. Having spent almost 2 years at Shine, Zara recruits across Australia and New Zealand for both legal and legal support staff across various practices, including class actions. In her previous experience, Zara spent over 4 years with corporate recruitment agencies like U&U Recruitment Partners. Zara is passionate about providing an excellent candidate experience to anyone who would like to work for Shine Justice Group and feels privileged to be part of a values-led organisation. So just very, very briefly, how today will work is that we will I'll ask questions of each of the panelists, and then your opportunity to ask questions as well. And we'll allow about 15 minutes at the end of the session. Now, if we get inundated with questions and we can't get around to them all, then we can get back to you because we'll get a list of all those questions. So if you could just ask your questions at the end of the session and put those questions into the Q&A area rather than into the chat, it just makes it easier for me to coordinate all the questions as well. So let's get started and welcome everyone again. And this session is being recorded and it will be sent to you after the event. It normally takes a couple of weeks for you to receive it. So Nat, starting off with you, can you just take us through the different types of interviews, and particularly more recently with COVID, what we've more become familiar with is the virtual platforms or the virtual interviews?
Sure, thanks, Susan. So nice to be able to set the scene and give the whole interview process some context. So I think there are obviously different types of interviews, and sort of set the scene. We start off with some firms who have screening interviews or telephone interviews. So that might be the first touch point you have with the firm, and a way to sort of see if you're right for the firm before you may have an in-person interview. So it could be round one for some firms, by way of example. Some other things that firms might do as part of their round one sort of interview type process, while not a traditional interview, they might have what we call one-way video interviews, where a question might flash up on the screen and you need to record your answer to that question. And they might have, a number of questions, and then you submit that as part of the application process. So a different type of interview, not with someone traditionally asking questions, but with a question sort of coming up on the screen and then you responding to that and recording yourself. But in addition, there are things like psychometric testing, EQ testing, assessment centres that firms may have part of that round one process. So not strictly and traditionally sort of interviews as such, but I thought it's important to note that. And then we get along to our hopefully in-person interviews this year. So they might take place in an individual format where you are put in a interview session with interviewers, or it could be in a group setting with group interviews. And generally these interviews take place, particularly the individual interviews, with a mix of partners and lawyers, or partners and HR, or lawyers and HR. So, each of us have a different sort of process. So for Bakers, it's usually you interview with a partner and a senior lawyer, whereas I think Zara and Chloe have a mix of HR and partners or lawyers. So, each firm does something different. Best to sort of check in with the firm as to what they do. The other thing to note is that some firms have 2 interviews, some firms have 1 interview. So really important to get an understanding of that. Who will you be meeting round 1 and who will you be meeting round 2? Does everyone get a round 1 and round 2, or sort of round 1, do you have to go through a round 1 process and be assessed to make it through to round 2? So really important to clarify those sort of questions. We only do 1 interview process. So we have 1 interview with a partner and a senior lawyer as part of our process. And
okay.
Sorry, did someone
No, keep going, keep going.
And then, of course, last year we had the pandemic, unfortunately, so we had to all pivot to virtual interviews. And I think the thing to note is everyone went into this process, quite concerned, both us from a firm perspective and, students from, a student perspective, but what the feedback that I received is that it actually went a lot better than people envisaged. So, that you could still have a really meaningful conversation, with your interviewers, get a sense of the firm, get a sense of the culture, ask questions in that Zoom format. So if we do need to go down that path this year, hopefully not. Most firms are back in offices, on a limited basis, but we're bringing people into offices. And we are intending to have our interviews in person this year, hopefully. So we are hoping to do that. But if we do need to go to virtual interviews, please don't, stress and worry about that. We'll manage it really well. And a couple of things to note if we do need to go through that virtual format, or in fact, if you are an interstate candidate applying for one of our firms, a few things to sort of remember and be mindful of going into that virtual interview. I thought I might share that if we do need to go down that path. Yeah, so making sure that you have a good background. So you can use a virtual background if you wish, or you can see that Zara and Chloe have got professional backgrounds. And the thing that I note with their backgrounds is there's nothing sort of distracting me. There's nothing bright or, that's kind of distracting me from them and focusing on them. So just be conscious of your background, be conscious of distractions as well. So, maybe put a note in your front door, please don't ring the doorbell, leave packages, or, keep your phone on silent. Just making sure that you're in a quiet environment so you can really concentrate and focus and perform your best in the interview. Making sure that you account for, any technical issues as well. So we all know the pain points of Zoom, and we all understand and appreciate things can happen. So, having things like your mobile phone ready for hotspot if you're having internet issues. And if you do cut out, don't worry about that. These things happen. Just just get, communicate by email with the HR rep or the interviewers to say, I'm having technical issues. I'll come on as soon as I can. Jump back on the screen, apologize. And, it also shows a bit of resilience that, and that you're able to handle a challenging situation.
Yeah.
So just, be kind to yourself. It can be challenging. I had to use my personal hotspot on numerous occasions running Zoom sessions last year. And it was totally fine. Like, we all are in it together, and it's all about supporting each other and, applying a bit of kindness and understanding to the process.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really great advice, and thanks for giving such a good overview of all the different types of interviews that you might experience. So we're going to move on to you, Zara, now, and perhaps what you could do is give us an overview of the recruitment process and what to expect as part of the clerkship process.
Of course. Thank you so much. And that was great, Natalie. So thank you so much for running us through that. So I would just start by saying that in Shine Lawyers, which is one brand of the Shine Justice Group, which consists of about 9 other brands, we have a recruitment process which spans from solicitors and also legal support staff. And there are 2 recruiters, including myself, and one who we've just had start last week. And with our recruitment process, our job is to really understand for our applicant, really what gets them out of bed every day, really what drives them. And we want to find the why to their what, because we're a very values-led organisation. So in the recruitment process, specifically for what we look for in our graduates, they are either current employees of Shine Justice, or they are previous summer clerks from our previous year. And for our clerkship, what we look for is students who are in their penultimate year. And we actually have our summer clerkship for 2022 coming up in July, which is in mid-July. We'll start advertising. So you'll see those CCADs all across Australia for our 2022 summer clerkship. So in that recruitment process specifically, what we do is we go through all of the applications, and we actually look through cover letters to find how you align to our Shine corporate values, which are always stand up for the little guy, dare to be different and ahead of the pack. And not only just, listing those values in your cover letter, but really what those values personally mean to you. So you may have had an instance where you've actually had a family member who has gone through a legal dispute, and that's why you really have a passion to stand up for the little guy. Or it may be a value which, you've volunteered at a community legal centre or a clinic, and that's where you've developed that excellent experience with client contact. So that's the first part. Then if you really have shown that in your cover letter, then we actually give you a phone call and we go through your experience and really finding out that why to your what, as I said. Then you could expect an interview with our legal practice managers, as we really understand through those STAR behavioural interview questions that we ask. And our managers in that face-to-face interview actually confirm your answers of what we've gone through in your phone interview. And they go through all of those things from a more personal level in that face-to-face interview. Of course, with COVID, through this year, we may have to do Microsoft Teams or Zoom interviews, but with the same tips that Natalie had passed on, it's so important for us to really show, understand your interest in Shine Lawyers and how you align to our values. So from there, you could expect to be asked to collect a reference check about you. And so it's really important to always, never leave a place with a bad reputation. It's always really important never to burn those bridges. So always have someone who can speak to your professional and character. And from there, our clerks are appointed for the very following year. So that's a bit of a high level overview of what happens in that clerkship recruitment process.
Thanks, Sarah. That's fantastic. And it's really, I'm glad that you mentioned about cover letters as well, because sometimes people say to me, oh, a cover letter is really that important? Don't they just kind of look at your CV? And I mean, no one really reads them, but you're saying that you're really sitting there going through them and looking at how much preparation was put into those. So you can kind of get a quick, Oh, that's great. Thanks, Nat.
Agree, Nat.
Yeah. So that was a really good point, and also around the values as well. So values seem to be something that is really, really important to tie into. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Chloe, that just brings me to the next question about the importance of preparation. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that this sounds like a silly question, but can you just wing it? Can you just kind of basically do all the prep on the morning of the interview or the night before? Like, you've had a busy day, you haven't got time. Like, what do you think?
I mean, you could. I wouldn't recommend it. I think when you are preparing for an interview, it's important to remember that as graduates or as lawyers, you're not just applying for a job anymore. This is your career. And if you care about your career, you're going to do the research and be prepared. You're at work 38 hours a week. So you want to make sure that where you end up is somewhere that you want to be. You want to make sure that you align yourself with that firm. So if it's a real shame when candidates haven't researched the firm or researched the people that they're interviewing with. And we can always tell. These people
really?
have taken.
I'm amazed. So yeah,
it's really shocking how many people come to the interview, and they've just looked at the website. I encourage you to do a thorough look at the website, people's social media. You can learn a lot from someone's LinkedIn profile. So you have to think, everyone's busy. You might be busy. We're busy too. People have taken the time out of their day to meet you, and they want to share their story. They want to learn about you and why you would be a good fit for their firm or their workplace. So definitely prepare, research the people that you're interviewing with, and come with questions to ask. It's really encouraging when people write them down. I know that you can get nervous, and people will come in and say, I had questions and I've forgotten them. Write them down, bring them with you. It's totally fine. And you want to look at maybe matters they've worked on. Firms will always advertise these. They want to share their successes. So have a look, see what these people have been involved in, so that you can show that you're genuinely interested. And also you'll know in advance if it's the type of work that you want to be doing. You can ask the right questions in the interview to reassure yourself that it is the work that you want to be doing. So you want to be thinking about, what kind of work you'll be doing, maybe how their teams are structured, learn about their career path. And, even if you don't end up working there, looking at what someone has done and being interested in their career path, you're always going to come out of it with knowledge for your own career either way. I love learning about people's career trajectories. It's never a straight line. So yeah, you'll always have some knowledge in your back pocket that will help you make decisions for your own career. And on the flip side of that, you should know yourself too, and be prepared in your knowledge of your resume, your values. What is it about you that sets you apart? So a lot of people forget what they've put on their resume. They forget
Yeah.
what extracurriculars they've included and left off. Some people don't put all of their work experience on your CV, and then they forget. And then we'll have to show them so they can refresh their memory. So think about, your work history, what you've enjoyed, didn't enjoy, your strengths, your weaknesses, and be prepared to answer questions about your technical skills, social skills, emotional intelligence, and things like that, because most of your questions that you're given, your answers, you'll be looking to yourself and to your experience to answer those. So it goes both ways.
Okay, that's great. So just, very, very briefly, in terms of then the theme there is just to look beyond the website as well. So the more information that you can actually find out,
So much
obviously,
information, yeah.
and it's very obvious as well. Yeah.
Yeah. LinkedIn, social media, you can look on their LinkedIn profile, see what they're sharing, might give you some insight as to their interests.
Yes.
Just the industry in general, a common question is, how do you stay up to date in the legal world? If this is an area that you want to work in, what is your knowledge of it? What do you know? Why are you interested? Why are you passionate? Really, we always want to draw out your passion and see why you want to be here. So there is a lot that you can do beyond looking at the website.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so Nat, over to you. What makes a standout candidate versus a least impressive candidate?
Yeah, so I think, following on from what Chloe was saying too, I think I want to just, really reiterate that preparation point. I think that really does showcase a candidate who is prepared versus, or who does stand out versus doesn't stand out. So, further to what Chloe said, thinking about things like finding out about the different firms' interview styles, like talking to HR or people who've interviewed with the firms to prepare yourself, and then researching interview questions, reflecting on how you'll answer those, and preparing. What I recommend in that preparation section is preparing some bullet points under each of those questions, and then asking your family or friends to ask you those questions and practice answering them. But I think the trick is, so you don't sound rehearsed, because that's a very big point with being impressive and being very natural, maybe ask them to tweak the question slightly each time, because it is really apparent to all of us. And both, Chloe and Zara have been saying they're in grad interviews at the moment when people are sounding very rehearsed and scripted. And I will also just say one more thing. It also is very apparent when you're doing virtual interviews, if, you've got your like an email up on your screen, or your document up on your screen, and you're reading those answers, because you can see someone's eyes following, the Word document. So just being very conscious of that. And, so very important. Those who prepare, I think, can be really standout candidates. And so totally echoing Chloe's point there. I think also the way that you present yourself. So having a think about your voice, your tone, the language that you use are really important in being sort of a standout candidate. So things like speaking slowly, clearly, articulating your words effectively, taking a moment for breath, but not, just rattling off your answer. And also thinking about how you present yourself in terms of your posture. So you can't really sort of see on a screen, but in an in-person environment, making sure, you're sitting upright, that you're maintaining eye contact. And in both the virtual world and an in-person world, showing that you're engaged through, as Susan perfectly demonstrated for me right now, nodding, smiling, that shows that you're really taking things in, you're listening, you're engaged at the process. And, bonus points if you can use, like I just demonstrated with Chloe, something Chloe said with preparedness, and you can incorporate that in your answer in further down in the interview process. So preparation key, how you present yourself key, and that research point. So a little bit of overlap again, Chloe, but really making sure you're researching the firm and beyond things like just the website, as Chloe said. So I would encourage you to look at things like the clerkship guide, connect with firms on their social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, so you get an understanding of what the firm's about and what they're doing as well. Your law student societies provide so much information and, really put a lot of effort into, blogs and articles and, events. So really attending those things and, really getting the benefit out of those things out as well. And then, again, knowing what stands out about the firm and being able to showcase in that your interview really makes a standout application, as does someone who knows their application and can intersperse the different parts of their applications in their answers as well. So, yeah, a couple of things to be a standout candidate during the interview process.
That's great. That's some really, really important information. So thank you for that. Zara, we're going to talk, and you mentioned before about the importance of fit with the culture of Shine. And you actually asked questions specifically to try and assess that value fit. So are you able to talk a little bit about that, including Patrick, is it Lencioni?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I guess in interest of time, what I might do actually is off the back of that, talking about Patrick Lencioni, we'll go through just that interview question so that we can actually show an example.
Do you want me to pull that one up?
Like. Yeah, sure thing. Go for it. So I guess while you're pulling that up, I'll just go through a bit of information as to why values fit is really important to Shine. So I guess according to a 2017 Leadership IQ survey, so 20,000 hiring managers were interviewed from all different industries, including legal. And interestingly, there was 46% of their new hires, they actually failed within the first 18 months. And a staggering of those failures, and 89% were due to a misalignment between the values of the company and also the values of the employee. So that's why with Shine, we are really focused to find employees who are really a strong values fit with our values, because no matter the role at Shine, it's really to shine a light on injustice and make the world a better place, really with one client at a time. So I guess in every interview, what's really important to us is to really, understand if that person's values really align with Shine. So in terms of this particular interview question, I'll just exit full screen. There we go. It's there. So with this particular interview question, what we're really hoping to find out is their alignment within Patrick Lencioni's framework. So this means that we're finding people who are humble, hungry, and smart. So really employees who are ambitious, but not really steamrollers, conscientious, but not unconfident, and kind, who really think win-win. So with this particular question, this is in all of our interview guides at Shine, and they actually measure humility. So we'll go through what a great answer actually looks like here. So with respect to the question, I actually look for the candidate to listen to the feedback and take it on board and putting it into practice. And I have to say, with this question, when you think about, improvement of your skills, this isn't about, knocking you down a peg and understanding every negative thing that your boss has said about you. Really, it's your chance to show your emotional intelligence and think from another's perspective, and also really celebrate how far you've come in this feedback all along the way. So in this instance, let's look at this. So the situation is that for this hypothetical employee, their manager wanted them to be more proactive in completing this high value pieces of work. So this was a situation that this employee chose to use in the answer for the question that's above in improving a particular skill that they've learned from their leader. So for this employee, the task was to really reflect and put this into action by planning the top priorities for the following day. So the action here is really that they created calendar invites and really notes to ensure that they were focusing on that high value work. And then the result of this is that they actually could celebrate with their manager because they were able to complete that high value work and then finish in the afternoon on that lower value activities like emails and things like that. So the question why it's in our interview guides is because it really understands the candidate's coachability and really temperament in receiving that feedback, which is really, really important to the culture that we have at Shine, which is really about continuous improvement. So I guess we feel that with any, it's really important for us to detect that values fit and that values alignment within Shine. And that's why we asked this particular question. So that's just a good example about what you could, have as an answer if you would ever be asked that question about.
That was a
what
great,
do you
I
need
really
to
love
ask?
that question, actually. I think it's
Yeah.
a fantastic question because it really also taps into, the growth mindset and how people take on feedback. And I think, it's actually very good just to kind of think of that for all those that are listening in how you would actually respond to that. So that's fantastic. So thank you for that. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But moving on, Chloe, to the types of skills that Gadens looks for, if you were to kind of describe those in terms of maybe the more technical legal skills and then the non-technical, and that also, I suppose, includes things like mindset and characteristics and attributes as well. Are you able to just share that with us?
Yeah, so at Gadens, and I'm just going to speak to our graduate program in particular, if that's okay, we don't really look for too many technical skills because we know that you've been a student. We know that you're intelligent generally because you've done this law degree, and that's amazing. What an amazing achievement. Well done, you. But in terms of technical skills, it is a program. It's a training and development program. So what we really look for in your application is that you have the basics. Your spelling, grammar, formatting is there. We can tell by your cover letter if you know how to format a document. We can tell whether you can spell. When it comes into looking at your CV, we'll look at how it's laid out. Are your bullet points all formatted correctly? Have you used all colons, some semicolons, some commas? Things like that really personally bug me. But in terms of, drafting those bigger documents, it's really hard to compare all candidates evenly without testing them, in my opinion, because we might take people onto the program who've worked as a legal assistant or as a support clerk or a paralegal, and everyone has varying experience. So we tend to assume that you're coming on, it's a clean slate, we will train you from there. And as you progress further in your career, you might find, and this will be more common if you go through a recruiter, I would imagine, firms will sometimes ask you for a piece of work that you've prepared, and you can redact it. So they might ask you for a redacted piece of work to demonstrate your technical skills. And the reason I say it might be more common if you come through a recruiter is, usually as graduates applying, you're doing that application yourself. But as you progress in your career, when you are using those, legal support recruitment resources, they will tend to help you with your resume and your cover letter. So that's when they will ask you for a piece of work, so they can see what you can do. I'm not sure if the others have anything to add to that, but then in terms of, sort of soft skills that we look for, it really comes down to your attitude. As I said before, you're thinking about your career and it's such a competitive industry. We want to know why you're passionate about our firm, the work that we do. Do you have the right attitude? Are you willing to learn is the main thing. We want people who are open, have that drive and ambition to learn, people who we think are going to put their hand up and say, hello, I'm here, give me work. It can be hard in such a busy environment. Everyone is flying around you. It's really fast paced. People aren't sitting there thinking, how can I develop this graduate today? I wonder what I can teach them. So we want people that are self-starters, that can make sure that they're putting their faces in front of people and, asking for work and trying to develop. Then the other key point I would say is communication. And this is something that you can demonstrate in the interview process as well. We want to see that you can communicate your thoughts clearly, obviously both in written format and spoken format, and that can come through in the way that you talk through your answers to questions as well. If you take a pause, think about how you answer the question and, answer calmly and confidently, all sorts of things come into it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really good to know. So thank you for that. Nat, just in terms of how to communicate with clarity and stay on message and keep your audience engaged, I know we talked a little bit before, and Zara showed that great example of a behavioural question. What kind of would you suggest?
Yeah, so, I don't mean to keep on going on about the point, but I think, preparation is part of that. If you want to come across, clearly staying on message, showing that you can present with, confidence, presence, concisely, I think really important to, prepare. So, researching the questions, researching the firm, thinking about how you'll answer those questions, preparing bullet points under each and, practicing. But to that point, it is really important to use what Zara showcased as the STAR technique. So STAR technique is S is the situation, T is the task, A for action, and R for result. And I thought I'd give a little bit of a different example to Zara's example, just so you can see how you can use it throughout your interview process. So what I encourage students to do is to use their best example. So if you are giving an example of the way that you organize something, for example, you might not want to rely on your Year 12 formal, but you want to think of something that's more current and more relevant to, the legal industry. So an example might be, I was the LSS competitions director. That was my situation. My task was to organise the negotiations competition. So that's the task. The action that I undertook, and you don't need to say it as formulaically as this, but the action that you would be talking about would be, I had to advertise it. I had to collate a list of participants and put them in teams. I had to book venues or rooms for each stage of the competition, book judges in, set out a timeline. You could talk through any problems that you encountered or any way you had to adapt and how you sort of actually dealt with that. So they are all the actions that you took. And then finally, you need to talk about the result. And we often find that students forget this. So please just be very conscious of that. So the result could be, I ran a very successful competition. These are the steps I learned. I learned a lot about time management, how to be adaptable and flexible, how to, anything you learned during the competition. But even, I'd learned, in future, I would take X, Y, Z steps and do things differently, which I feel I can bring to next year's competition. So that's that learning piece is important. The success piece is important. But, if it was a challenge and you had to adapt, you can showcase that as well. You built your profile, etc. So really important. And it gives you a nice little structure to answer questions as well. So that's called the STAR technique. There's a lot of information online about it, but I thought I'd just unpack one way that you could answer that sort of question.
So I think, so that what you're saying then is you need to be kind of spending more time in the action and the result and less time in the situation and the task, because sometimes people can get into a little bit too much detail, which can then mean that you're starting to lose engagement as well.
Absolutely. And so, if you prepare in that way and you practice, as I said before, that really addresses that point of communicating with clarity and with impact. And then some tips and hints to keep your audience engaged. I think a very important one, which I think we're all going to keep coming back to, is the importance of being yourself. It's really important to showcase who you are so that you get a sense of the firm gets a sense of you, to build a rapport with the interviewers. So you can do things like, thank you, Susan, for that question, or, thank you, Zara and Chloe. I really appreciated you sharing a bit about your career journeys before you launch into a question for each of them. So really, it's a nice way to, include someone's name and show that you're engaged. Or, Zara, I really like the way that you showcase the STAR technique using your values. But just showing you've listened and you're repeating back. So that's showing you're engaged, you paid attention, that Shine is very particular about their values in the interview process. So think about ways like that where you can sort of stand apart, showcase your engagement and your interest in the firm. And then finally, come prepared with questions, which is what, Chloe said as well. Totally fine to bring them on a notepad and paper. Don't feel like you can't do that. And you must have questions, like come with questions. again, it goes to that engagement piece and that interest in the firm, and really think about thoughtful questions. They could be questions for your interviewers specifically. So Susan, I know that you did XYZ in your career, can you tell me a little bit about that? But if you don't know that your interviewers prior to the interview and you just find out on the day, you showcase something they spoke about throughout the interview, or you use a question that is a meaningful question and not something that you could find out from the website. So don't come and ask, how many rotations does Baker McKenzie offer its graduates? Because that's information in the clerkship guide. We talk about in all our marketing material. But you could ask the question, what can you please share a little bit about the graduate rotation process and how you put in preferences, do graduates get those preferences, and what sort of rotations do you encourage graduates to undertake? Totally different question, still showing interest in the firm specifically, but more thoughtful than a question you could sort of ascertain from the marketing material or website.
Okay, that's great. I'm just keeping a bit of a track on time. So we've only got a few more minutes, and I can see that there's quite a lot of questions already. I just wanted to ask you, Chloe, in terms of, and also Zara and Nat, when you are very, very nervous before an interview, which I think, most of us are, what are some kind of hacks that you would suggest that candidates might use?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've noticed while I've been sitting here, I've been swiveling on my chair a little bit. Don't do that. Try to sit still. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm such a poor example right now.
I had not noticed at all. You're fine.
I haven't either. But
I did notice because it is one thing I actually do say to students, like, don't try not to go into a swivel chair and, do things like distract yourself like that, or twirl your hair, or bite your nails. So those things are very distracting. So it wasn't distracting me, but I'm very conscious of that.
Don't be like Chloe. Don't be like me. I would say, it all comes down to what you're comfortable with. You want to make sure that you go into the interview feeling comfortable, and what ticks you have that you'll need to pull back in the interview. So it could be things like swiveling on your chair. There could be things like you will pick something up and play with it for the interview. And, if it's your hands that will get you, use them to talk. Don't pick anything up. Maintain eye contact with the people speaking with you. If you know that, you tend to look down when you're nervous, or you look out the window and, look at them, nod. Make sure that you're engaging and showing that you're listening. What else? I always think space is important. Sit somewhere that is comfortable for you if that is an option. Sometimes in interviews, I have realized that I'm sitting extremely close to the candidate. They might sit next to me, and I always push my chair back a little bit, and I find that a bit odd. So read the room as you come in, find a spot that's comfortable for you, sit up straight. Facial expressions are important. If you're nervous, make sure that you're smiling, showing that you're interested. I mean, don't force it if you don't want to, but being mindful of all of those little things. How are you holding yourself? How are you holding your hands? What is your face doing? Eye contact. And I guess with all of these, as I said, what's comfortable for you? What are your tics? You don't want to be thinking about all of these things at once, because you're also trying to answer questions too. And you can get really nervous. So just think about what you struggle with and what you need to be mindful of. And at the end of the day, I know that you're nervous, but you have to remember that you should be proud, because so many people apply for these jobs or roles, and you've already made it this far. You've beaten so many applicants to be here. So have a little bit of pride and confidence in that. You're already here. You've made it. Try to put the nerves aside as much as you can, and feel comfortable, because the company or the firm, they think that you should be there. And so just always remember that.
That's such a good point, isn't it? Like, you just have to go through so much to get an interview. So keeping in mind that you actually made it, that's a huge achievement in itself. And just enjoying the moment, I think, above everything. the biggest tip which I could give in handling the nerves and wrangling them is literally just breathing. There's an
Yeah.
awful
I
amount
was
of
going to say the
Yes,
same
right?
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
there's an
Yep.
awful amount of
Mhm.
studies just in terms of, the box breathing technique. It's amazing. You don't have to feel like you're hyperventilating in an elevator. It's fine. But I think just, focusing on your breathing and focusing what you want to get out of the interview is really important.
And also remembering you don't have to answer questions right away if you are nervous.
Yes.
If you need to take a moment, just say,
Mhm.
I'm just going to think about this for a second.
Mm.
And actually, I forgot to say before, Nat, when you were talking about your examples, it's also really good if you can to try not to have the same examples for
Yes.
questions. Often candidates, they get so nervous and they go, oh, I can use that answer for this. That applies here too. But what we are looking for is different answers for each question.
I'm just going to ask one last question before I then I throw it open. Process for asking for feedback, and that will vary in each of your organisations. So do you want to just very briefly run through that? So maybe Nat, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so look, I think one thing to appreciate is that, we all get, a large volume of applications. It's quite a hectic process. We wrap up the recruitment process for clerkships, or, it might be graduate positions, and then we're launching into running clerkships or graduate programs. So, just being very conscious of that, and that it might take a little while for people to get back to you, and that we can't give feedback to thousands of applicants. So we all try to do our best to do that when we can and when it's appropriate, if we can. So, we also need to take our advice and be kind to ourselves and look after ourselves as well. I think not so much feedback, but I think, if it is in your natural way to do so, it's totally fine to email your interviewers after the interview, just expressing your enthusiasm for the interview and, if you enjoyed it and what you enjoyed about it. Don't feel you have to do that. But if that's something that you feel comfortable in doing and that's your style, then, it's totally fine to do that. Wouldn't be asking for feedback at that stage. And I think, if you don't get through to a clerkship or graduate role following an interview, then you can ask for feedback. But there are some firms that just say flat out, we don't provide feedback. And I know that you might sort of feel very frustrated about that, but I think when I talk to some of my counterparts and we all sort of discuss our workloads, it is very hard. And we all try to do what we can when we can, but it is a sort of a bit of a mixed approach to feedback, I would say.
Okay, what about Chloe? What happens at Gaydens?
I would say if it's through the application process and you've applied online and then you've received a rejection email, we generally wouldn't provide feedback then, because that is just opening it up. That's a lot of people that we would have to provide feedback to. But if someone does progress to the interview stage and they are unsuccessful, we will always call them. It's good to have that personal touch. If you've met with someone, they deserve a phone call. So if you're at that stage, I would feel comfortable providing a candidate with feedback over the phone. And I would try to, if you feel comfortable, I know that when you receive those calls, you might just want to jump off the phone straight away. But I would use that because the interviewer's already ready. They're on the phone. They know that it's going to be a hard conversation. So they'll be usually prepared for that question. So I would gently ask, is there something I can do better next time? Rather than, saying, what did I do wrong? It can be also hard for someone to list, okay, here you go. Always ask, what can I do better next time? And just remembering that, it is highly competitive, and the quality of candidates that we do receive is always so excellent. And it can just be the smallest thing that sets you apart from someone else. And it might not be that you did anything wrong. It could just be that someone was that slightly bit better than you. But I would use that phone call rather than then sending an email later when they're back in work and they're busy, because it's just much easier to get it done. Otherwise, then they'll have to refresh their memory again and then type it out. I would use that.
Okay, Sarah, what about at Shine?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's such a good example, Chloe, because to use that opportunity over the phone with that hiring manager or recruiter to ask for feedback straight away, you've got a minute of their time, so go for it, and be as polite as possible. And I always think that to thank them for their time and also congratulate them on finding the best person for the role. What goes around comes around, right? So to put that thanks out there, and also to put those well wishes out there for the successful candidate, it's a lovely step. And we're much more inclined to consider that person for a future opportunity as well if they do that. And I would suggest for the Shine recruitment process, so from the date of application, you actually receive an application acknowledgement email to say that we will be in touch with you within 4 weeks. So we have very strict recruitment timelines, because the biggest bugbear of candidate experience for job seekers out there is that they apply and they never hear back. So we really like to send that application acknowledgement email. Then if you secured an interview, we'd like to give you that phone call if unfortunately you have been unsuccessful. And we do like to give you 1 or 2 pointers in how you can improve for next time. So that's what our kind of service levels are of Shine, because you've invested a lot of time and energy, and so have we. So we want to make it as meaningful as possible in that feedback to you.
Okay.
We also, just a quick point, Bakers is the same. We spend a lot of time reviewing and having, a number of people review each application. So we do put in our emails that you will hear from us in like 3 weeks, or by the end of September or early September, just to manage those expectations. And so that we are giving a really thorough review. We know that some firms get back to you very quickly, but please note we are trying to do our very best in giving you, the best opportunity and making sure that we do that really thorough review as well. So yeah, we're very similar, Zara.
Okay, thank you very much. We might move to the questions, and I have just had a quick peruse of those, and there are some that are more around cover letters, so I might come back to those ones a little bit later, and I'd really like to kind of focus more on the interview itself. There's a couple of people that have talked about being mature age students and the advice that you would have for, I don't like that word older, but for second career law students or later lawyer, how much of a factor does age play in the decision process, and what advice would you have? Just to open that up to you all, if anyone wants to answer that question.
Well, I would start off by saying, it's illegal to discriminate by age. So getting that out of the way first. But I know that we actually get this question a lot, and it is surprising to me, but obviously, people have those insecurities because there is, unconscious bias sometimes in interviewers. And, as much as you can try to train people in those interviewers, it can always be an insecurity if you are ultimately, unsuccessful in your application. But from our perspective, at least, if it is your second career or you are a mature age student, that's fantastic. You have more life experience. You have more work experience. It's always a plus. We have people on our program who are mature age students, they're in their 30s, they have 3 kids, it's their second career, and they always excel and do amazing. So I would say it's not something to worry about. It's more of a plus than anything else. You have that extra experience above the other candidates, and I wouldn't worry about it at all.
So it's switching the mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is another great question. How should we prepare differently for a final stage interview compared to the initial first stage interview?
That's such a good question, because I would expect that not the same questions would be covered in that final stage interview. So I would do the same amount of preparation as you had in the first, or whatever it was, because no doubt it'll be a new person who is attending that interview, and therefore you'll need to do the same amount of preparation for that particular person. But I would also have many more questions as well in that final stage interview, because undoubtedly you'd have many questions that came out of the first stage interview and you'd thought about it after the interview, because that happens. So I would be inclined to be asking many more interview questions of the interviewers at that point in time. So that would be my tips. It would be this, it's pretty similar magic recipe that you need, just preparation and many more questions.
Okay, thank you. Nat, this is a question specifically for you. As Baker McKenzie, being an international firm, how do you screen international awareness in interviews? Is there a particular area that BM looks for in their candidates?
Yeah, so, I think at each stage of our process, whether it's the application process or the interview process, we are looking for people who are globally minded and globally passionate. I mean, we're, the first global law firm, with 77 offices. Global comes into everything that we do and the way we think and we work together and collaborate. So, but we also appreciate, and particularly in light of the pandemic, that, people may not have had the opportunity to have those global experiences, or as people have stated in their applications, that for financial reasons they've not had the opportunity to travel or to work overseas or study overseas. So again, you don't feel you have to have those sort of things on your application, or sort of showcase them in your interview. But thinking about someone who's globally minded, you can talk about subjects that you have undertaken or parts of subjects that cover global subject matter. You can showcase your interest in the global economy and just having that insight into what's happening in the world, what's happening in Baker's world, what matters have we worked on, who have you met during, in the lead up to the recruitment process at our events, and or what have you read in our clerkship guides with, stories that people have showcased or matters that they've worked on that have really piqued your interest. So you can showcase global interest in those ways as well. Language skills, you might have cultural awareness that have come through either through an exchange program or travel experiences. But if you don't, I also want to point out that Baker's actually runs cultural awareness training as well for our associates, because we want to make sure that we are all very culturally respectful and aware about different cultures as well. So you will definitely get that sort of training and lots of opportunities to connect with your global counterparts. So, during an international clerkship at the very start of your career, or as you progress in your career through various regional training programs or practice group training programs across, APAC or across the globe, or the opportunities to work overseas. So, we have those opportunities, and I think that's why we ask a question like that, to sort of understand your global interests and experiences, and why you want to be a global lawyer and what you can sort of bring to the firm as well.
Okay, thank you for that. The questions are coming in, so I'm going to go back to another question, which was it was touching on cover letters as well, and about what actually can applicants do to differentiate themselves to actually get to the interview stage. So probably kind of touched on a lot of this already, but is there anything else that you would suggest? And someone's also mentioned about sporting achievements, and does that kind of show competitiveness and in a positive way, and discipline and things like that as well? So would you talk about sporting achievements in a cover letter?
Yeah, it's another great question. We had, as mentioned, with respect to cover letters, what's important for us at Shine is to understand, in reciting our corporate values in our cover letter, which is always stand up for the little guy and dare to be different and head of the pack, what those values actually mean to you. So it's really your interpretation of how those values sit and align with your personal values, and ergo with the sporting achievement. If we are looking for in the job advertisement competitiveness or a high performer, or words like a self-starter, you could certainly use those. If you've got no other professional work experience which could highlight that a little bit more in a more practical sense, if all that you do have is a sporting achievement that you've gone to state, or a really high level achievement at that sport, then of course you can use that and demonstrate how you feel that is a demonstration of a high achievement potential. So yeah, I would definitely say, if you've got nothing else to use, then I would certainly say it, because it can at least put you a bit of an edge above many other applicants who may not have that sporting achievement.
Okay. Another question about someone that is a recently admitted solicitor. The positions advertised are few and far between. So what is your advice on someone in this person's position about applying for admin, secretarial, paralegal roles just to get their foot in the door? This individual says that they're very upfront in their cover letter, stating that they're happy to start off in this capacity and then obviously move into a position once it becomes available. So what's your thoughts on that?
Where I'm sitting here.
Silence.
It's a hard one. A lot of firms will want, if you're admitted, they are hesitant to hire people as, those support roles, because they generally want someone who's going to be in those roles for a long time. So it is hard. I would encourage you just to keep trying, maybe connect yourself with a legal recruiter, someone who specializes in legal recruitment, because some firms use recruiters for a lot of their roles.
Sorry, I'm just taking a quick shot. Just so I don't forget.
And some firms use recruiters for those entry level roles, and it can be a really helpful person just to help you get your foot in the door. I would say that I would keep applying for graduate roles. Firms like ours, we take PLT qualified admitted solicitors on our graduate program. So there's that avenue. There are other firms that follow that non-traditional strategy for their graduate programs as well. Beyond that, I wouldn't have much to say otherwise. Just keep trying, make sure that your cover letter is perfect, your resume is perfect, because if that's the only part of you that they're seeing, you want it to be polished. Check your social media profiles. Often we don't have time to look at your social media until later in the process, but if that's something you're worried about, just double check it, make sure that everything relevant is on there, and just keep trying.
I'm just going to ask probably a final question. This one is, it's not about interviews, but it's about the stage after reference checks. Someone has just said about backdoor references. So do you go and seek out people that they haven't given you, that you might know of someone at that organisation that they've worked in? I'd imagine you'd be pretty busy. You wouldn't have the time to do that.
No, we don't definitely don't do that. We do ask for a couple of I did see a question pop up for a couple of references in your application. So we ask for their name, title, number. So for, I think that to answer that question, and we don't tend to call them as such, but we do security checks and police checks before you come in as a seasonal clerk. So we our team or the provider who does that will reach out to them to confirm the dates of your employment and the like. So that's where that kind of fits in. For our lateral staff or our lawyers, we actually do proper detailed reference checks, but again, it's not backdoor, it's the people that you provide us with. Yeah, with those sort of things. So
okay, well look, it's just on 1:30 now, so I think that we might just leave it there, and I just want to say a huge thank you again to you all for sharing your insights, and just to show that you really are kind of very, very friendly, very kind of welcoming individuals. So I think, often it is around mindset and just to also look at it as a two-way process. So it is also your opportunity to see whether the organisation is going to be the right place for you as well. So thank you, Nat, thank you, Zara and Chloe, and I really appreciate you being involved and really making a big difference in helping people just in terms of their knowledge and what to expect. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone, for attending, and I hope that you've taken away some good advice. And we look forward to seeing you down the track at the other webinars that we're running. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.